I'm Mark Upton and joined by Al Smith. We're both from My Fastest Mile, and today we're going to have a little bit of chat about technology and how that's being used in a sporting context, and particularly I think in a player development context. There's obviously a lot of advantages, but maybe some disadvantages. Al, what's on your mind regarding technology? Where do you want to start with it?
I guess the thing I always tend to want to start with is engagement. How can you use technology to engage players, to engage the learner, and maybe what are some of the things about technology that might inhibit engagement if it's used in the wrong way? If it's just another tool, whatever aspect of technology we're talking about. So it's how that tool's deployed that determines whether it engages people and helps them be a better learner, or whether it actually inhibits them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a theme we've spoken about before. But that is it hindering or helping? Basically, it tends to come down to that, doesn't it? And I think also not just you talk about learners, not just players, but coaches as well. And maybe some of the good examples of engagement and using your agency as a coach for your own learning is some of the social media, and even Twitter, when used appropriately, allows you to form a network of people that can be really valuable for your own learning. And I think that's clearly for me one of the pros and advantages of technology is how it enables you to connect and network with a range of people that probably only 10 years ago you would never have dreamed of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many layers to that as well, because you can connect with a wider world through Twitter and a whole bunch of other medium, but I think probably more importantly than that, you can connect with your immediate community of practice. You can connect with whether it's coaches in the same club as you, whether it's coaches in the local area, the regional area, whatever it is. There's so many tools now where you can moderate practice forums that don't rely on you having to be in the same place at the same time, which is always the biggest limiter. There is so much of what we hear about the kind of blocker to coach development being that coaches learn through peer coaching more than anything else, but the opportunities for peer coaching are so few and far between.
Yeah.
For me, technology is a huge, the modern social media creates a huge opportunity to do peer coaching virtually.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even I was only a discussion last week with a coach developer from a team sport, and we were talking about the latest Periscope. So what Twitter released, the ability just to live stream video from your phone or whatever device you've got. We were saying how we're watching a senior team training session, so a national senior team train, and saying that could be streamed to anyone in your sport that wanted to have a look at how that training session was put together, what was happening in it, and obviously then you can engage in chat or other various forms of communication around that content.
Yeah, totally. And there's a whole host of ways that the various tools allow you to then curate that by clipping aspects of video, by adding layers of comment to aspects of video that start to build a dialogue and a story around what played out.
Yeah.
And really add that richness that you really need to understand the context of that learning and reflect on it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that conversation, isn't it, where you often get a few different views, and it's a bit of this sense-making process that we would also talk about, that there's not necessarily a black and white, right or wrong. Is this the right way? Is this the wrong way? It's often there can often be multiple ways, and the context is crucial. So having conversations and engaging in various views around that, I think, is helpful to then try and apply that in a different context to help to see it from different views. I think gives you a more global or rounded view, and then you can take it in your context.
Yeah, massively. And I guess that from a player perspective, the most important part of that, of course, is making it your own, making it real for you. I think that's probably, so if we're talking about predominantly using video more effectively to reflect and learn, there's huge opportunities for players to own more of the learning through having access to not just the big match video, but video of any training, whether that's formal training or they just want to pop a camera behind them when they're practicing in their own yard or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The opportunity to use video as a reflective learning tool and make it your own and put it in your context is definitely much bigger now than it's ever been.
Yeah, agreed. And I think how helpful that is, I think there's a grey area there between this idea, again, a player's engaging in reviewing video, whether it's of them just of their own involvements in a match, whether it's another teams that they're not involved with, whether it's training. Are they viewing that footage really because they understand the value of it deeply and can what's the best way to put it? Yeah, I think, do they really understand the value, or are they doing it because there's this subtle influence that the coach wants them to do it? And I think there's a big difference between that, where they're almost ticking a box, where the coach says it'd be a good idea if you watch some training. And I remember I've observed it in previous experience in coaching. I remember watching a player from afar sitting in front of a screen reviewing some training footage, and you can just tell he wasn't engaged with it, but the assistant coach had said it'd be a good idea if you watch some training footage. So I think whilst on the surface it could look the same, the drivers of it can play a big role in how effective it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some interesting work floating around now about, I guess that's one of those areas we mentioned at the outset that might be a limiter to learning. If the power play within an organisation is actually forcing, whether it's a coach or a player, down a path where they feel that that's what they have to do to be credible or to sustain their involvement even. And I guess that's something that's set culturally by the leadership of an organisation, but it's also something that's set by every individual within it. And I guess, that's probably the most challenging aspect of certainly coaching, is being brave enough to leave the space for someone to engage so you can see whether they are, rather than imposing it on them and all you know is whether they're compliant or not.
Yeah, exactly. And then I suppose the other area we've got to touch on with technology is the ability to collect and use data. And that's probably as concerning as any, isn't it? I think what we've talked before about creating a learning network is a positive. Video generally is a positive thing. Data, I'm not so sure at the moment, and particularly when it relates to team sports or long-term player development, which we would say is an inherently complex process. I think we're missing a trick at the moment, trying to use data, putting things in boxes and trying to pretend that we're dealing with a simple process. And I'm not sure if that's helping a lot of the time. Yeah,
I think for me, we're back to this notion that it's just a tool. Any piece of data that's generated is a tool. How you use that tool determines how valuable it is. If the tool, again, is being used to instruct and create conformity, that's not really thinking about the long-term needs of the player, the coach, whoever it is. But actually, and I guess where data can be really useful is informing in the short term what some of the influencing factors might have been around how a play emerged, how behaviour emerged in a certain way, how a skill did or didn't evolve within that short-term context.
Mm-hmm.
The leap that then gets made out of the realities of the complexity of human development is that we then try and make inferences about what that data says in the long term. And there's just too much going on. There's too much adaptive change taking place in any player's context in the longer term to be prescriptive at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for me it's about putting data in its context and situating it in the moment more than what I guess where I get more nervous is where data is being used to predict far into the future of a player's development.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, I think it's the coach playing the role of a filter too. So absolutely is, data can inform the decision-making process of coaches and can play a really important role in that. But I think particularly then when it comes to what gets passed on to the players, the coach plays a really important filtering role, and often data may not even enter the equation in a conversation with a player. You just got to be careful, I think, when the data's driving those conversations. So as an example, recently I read where in a football academy in the States, they were going on about, all their the player tracking data and the match event data that they get from certain suppliers, and talking about, okay, this coach said, I can sit down with a midfielder and say, you need to run this far, or you need to have this percentage of forward or penetrating passes. And for me, that again doesn't respect the complexity of the game, because the player would be in their eyes to say, no, I need to run as far as the game demands, or I need to pass forward when the opportunity is there. And if they're not, then why should I have a higher forward passing percentage? So I think that's where it's being misused at times. It's good for the coach to know that, but you just got to be very careful about how that's then conveyed to players when you engage in feedback or doing video reviews, for example.
Yeah, for sure. And actually the most interesting part of that, of course, is that data used at its best, and for that matter, video analysis and review used at its best, is used to inform practice design.
Yeah.
It actually, given how much of learning certainly in a complex game sport is situated, isn't conscious. It's lived. It's experienced.
Yeah.
If you're not using that information to then create a lived experience that's realistic and creating the space, the affordances for action that the player needs to navigate and understand,
yeah,
then you're just complicating things rather than embracing the complexity of them.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's still 10, 12 years on from when we first had access to GPS data and some good match analysis, and that was far and away the most valuable thing, as you described, is informing how we design our practice sessions, whether it was to get a conditioning effect on the players or whether it was to improve decision making under pressure. Understanding what situations are players in matches and using some of that data to then hopefully design and simulate certain game situations, and that was really powerful, and yet I think it's still underutilized that way to an extent.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's hard work.
Yeah.
It's hard work, and for me, that's the job of coaching. Too many people fall into this comfort zone of seeing the job of coaching as being the filter for information.
Yeah.
When actually the job of coaching is about shaping a learning environment that people can engage with and develop through.
Yeah.
And that's bloody hard.
Yes.
So it's fantastic when you do see it, because you see, I often talk about seeing people with their game faces on.
Yeah.
And you only get that when the learning's rich and when the environment's been really carefully thought out to meet their needs.
Yeah.
For me, the really powerful way to use, for example, video tech and video feedback is to give the player the agency to identify the things that they think they need to work on, but actually to encourage the player to then challenge the coach to create a learning environment that's going to help them work on it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that gets with, I mentioned at a conference last week, we started talking about the player and the coach being co-creators of their learning environment. So I hope, ideally you get to that level where it's a partnership, where they're both thinking about it and equally engaged in what is the best environment to challenge me as the player at any point in time. Yeah,
absolutely. And the sooner you can get there, the sooner you're going to be trucking, the quicker you're going to be learning.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Thanks, Al.
Thank you.